And welcome back to Speaking from Experience. And I have in studio with me today the BJ Robbins from Flyover Media, Smugcast movie review. We could go down the entire list. I mean, the man does it all.
Juice in the morning, Juice Pick'em, and then Off the Cuff.
Yeah, so
with Calvin and Devon.
Like I said, he's constantly in the studio doing things. That's what we were just talking about. And if you're not a subscriber or following any of those shows, get over there and do it.
Oh, and the BJ Robbins project too.
Yeah, that's
the one we were gonna talk about is the one I forgot about.
And so I do want to say, before we jump into this, if anybody listening has kind of heard some of your shows or some of my shows, this one today is probably going to be a little bit different. It's not we're not going to be cutting up. We're not going to be coming at each other like you've seen in other shows. This one's a little bit more of a serious topic, and I just got to say that I really appreciate you reaching out and wanting to come on and do this.
Yeah, and that's kind of where my show, the new one I want to do, is because I felt like I got pigeonholed, right? I felt like it was like certain kind of jokes, be a certain kind of persona. You're playing it because on Smugcast, I'm a big wrestling fan, professional wrestling fan, so you take yourself and you turn it up to 10, right?
Absolutely.
And that's what we did, AP and I. But I felt like we got pigeonholed, and then we didn't get into like some things that I have a huge interest in, right? And I have some upcoming shows with people that are battling addiction, battling other things. And so, because I think people hear those stories, and if you could, the whole point I got in the podcast was like, if one person, or in everything I'm doing, if one person's listening to something and they take something from it, and it helps them, then it's kind of like music. If you listen to the song, you're like, wow, I'm getting something from it, and it helps. And that's kind of what I got into it, to make someone laugh on a bad day. But now, to take someone who has a certain life and be a certain way, and then realize what they're going through, and they're like, okay, I see what's going on.
And and I appreciate it. I was up on the BJ Robbins podcast and our project, and
huge hit, by the way.
Was it?
Yep. Mm-hmm. I got a lot of feedback about that because they were so surprised that knew me, you and I, and what we talked about and how we went about through it. And they were really impressed with it. And then they were like, and then that kind of, I wanted to use that. That's why I asked you, I want to take that episode because I know you from another side. Because my respect for you went up a million. Like, we're not like friends, right? I mean, we are now. We talk and everything.
Absolutely.
But when my dad passed away, it'll be a year, December 2nd. You showed up. Like, if you didn't, I wouldn't have noticed. But because you were friends with AP and then also our other friend Sproles, and you showed up, and I never forgot it. All those other people that were there, I mean, I knew they were going to be there, but like, you showed up, and I was like, okay, so that's some next level stuff, and it was all from us talking into microphones.
Absolutely, but that's the other part too, and I agree with you. When we started this, we wanted to, kind of battle, and we'll get into this a little bit more later, but today's world, everybody on social media shows their lives are perfect and things like that, but when my wife and I kind of started Married with Children, the idea was to be real. Like, we have issues, we have struggles, we have, arguments and bad days and those kind of things. But that, to me, my respect from you was the help that you'd given me and knowing what you were going through. And that was something I wanted to be there for you and your family in that situation. And it is funny in the sense that listening to you guys, and I started with your first episode of Smugcast. Like you said, I've been buddies with AP, and
that was the awful episode. But go on.
and everybody's first episode is bad.
Hi, welcome to Smugcast. Hi, this is AP, and with me as always, this is BJ.
And we're two 30-somethings going to talk about life and kids, and
yeah.
But to go through that, even though yes, we didn't have the friendship even that we have now, I felt like I knew you a lot better because I had sat there and listened to you every week talk about Pops, talk about your mom, talk about your backstory, your brother, and so for me, it was important for me to be there because, we had developed that, like you said, from talking to a microphone, and, it has grown into something even bigger.
Yeah. I have a lot of great friends from it. The podcast community was great with the GoFundMe, the money that was donated, and the comedians and podcasters that came down to my house in the living room, the people that called in, sent messages, and And then that's where you know that you made an impact, and you don't realize it. And I think that's something we're going to talk about today is like you don't realize that sometimes there's people there for you because you think that they're not, but you'll be surprised that like if you really open up, talk to somebody or let them know what's going on, there are people that are going to be there to help you.
Absolutely. And I will say this about the BJ Robbins project, the show I was on, something a little bit humorous is obviously we do several different shows here all over the place, and my mom listened to the show with you and me on it, and I get a text. She said, "I'm so proud of you." So it took your show for me to get that text message of how proud she was. And I know she's proud because she's going to now listen to this and probably call me and be like, you make me sound bad. I know she's proud, but it was a really good episode, and it really struck her to see, us talk in a way that I don't think she expected to hear either. Yeah,
I mean, it is because to put yourself, to go from a certain persona and to try down to be an actual interviewer, I mean, it's different if you have people come unplugging your stuff, or if you have a certain genre, like you have racing and then there's outdoors and things like that. So that's, a certain genre and driven, but to be able to sit down with somebody and be like, and have them be in their rarest form. I love that, is because can you have somebody like talk about something that they normally won't talk about?
Absolutely. And that's really where we split. Married with Children had really become, we were interviewing everybody. And we found that was our best episodes. But for Callie and I, we missed kind of being able to sit back and just talk about us and have some fun and talk about pop culture. And that's why we kind of spun off to the speaking from experience, because this is what I love to do as well, is this idea of getting to talk to people and learn from them and the things that they do. And grow from that. And so, again, I appreciate you coming down today. And like I said, from here on out, it's probably not going to be what people would expect from you and I with mics in front of us.
Oh, yeah.
But I think it's an extremely important topic. And in the same way you talked about me coming to Pops' visitation, it's the same way I felt. And to give a little backstory for those listeners how this started, unfortunately, a little over a week and a half ago, the Jennings County community lost a 21-year-old young man to suicide. And he had played football for me. His class was extremely close. I was head football coach for 2 years while they were there. Obviously was in the school as a teacher, as a dean of students with them there. And it was a really tough situation. I got the news that Thursday morning at about 6:30 in the morning, and and I told my wife, it was amazing to me. I made a post to all of my kids just saying, man, reach out if you need something, and was really worried about my kids and those players and that I had been around. You were one of a handful of people who messaged me and said, hey, man, if you need somebody to talk to, let me know, because I know you're worried about everybody else, but if you need somebody to talk to, let me know. And in the same sense, that meant the world to me, because you were observant enough to know, all right, the guy's going through some things right now, and I'm at least going to reach out and say, if you need help, I'm here.
Yeah.
Meant the world to me. And then that night you messaged me and said, hey, man, call me. I got an idea.
I got to stop doing that, by the way, because I did that to two people that night, and both people were, when I talked to them, they're like I'm old school. Like I want to hear your voice. Right.
Absolutely.
And I'm weird like that, I guess. And I did it to Calvin, and it was about their show. And then like, I guess our thing that we had, like talking about relationships meant so much. He's like, he thought I didn't want to do his show anymore. And so I was like, no. Like, so just, that's why text can be so impactful at times. But yeah. And I say anything about an idea. Actually, I want to do the show. And then my first idea was actually go to the school and talk to people. Right. Mm-hmm. But let's see how this goes, and maybe we can utilize that. So, because shocked by that, 21 years old, life's just starting, mm-hmm. right? Because to me, high school is great, but my life really started when I got out of high school, right? Because for a lot of people, you're on your own, but I've dealt with anxiety, depression, not so much bipolar, but I deal with it a lot, and a lot of it had to do with my childhood, right? But most people don't want to admit where it comes from. So I'm 6'3", right around 290. I have a beautiful wife. I have I just talking about my son. He's a freshman got in a JV game and a sectional game, right? My oldest son's 16. They're both in great health. They both get good grades. I'm middle class. I mean, I pulled up in a Lexus, right? So I have like the epitome of what you're chasing.
Absolutely.
Especially being from Seymour. Not just from a small town, and I live in Greenwood. But your epitome was to try to get somewhere, right? But there are so many insecurities, right? My real father left when I was 6. And that had a huge impact on me because it was like, why is that family better than the one that you had? So already my confidence was shot from right there.
How vivid is that memory?
Oh, I still remember in Seymour, I think it's across from where the CVS now used to be Noltings or something like that. I remember running to the car at 6 or 7 years old, run to my car, get the doors locked, and I saw my biological father grab my older brother, Craig, and shake him and said, "You're no child of mine," right? The other memory I have is him taking me to meet the woman that he left my family for. The other memory was my mom pulling a shotgun out in the middle of Seymour. So that's my childhood. I moved like almost 30 sometimes by the age of 18. Trailer parks, we got evicted. Me and my mom, my brother lived in a room probably from this size over. Bunk beds in high school, right? So right away, I'm already thinking I'm not good enough. So when I would date some of the other girls in high school, like I would go to their houses and I would just sit like this because I was like, I never thought I was good enough for those people. So
felt like you couldn't touch anything.
Yeah. And my mom went through depression, obviously, and I don't blame her for that, right? So I do think that some of this is hereditary. My mom would never talk to anybody about it. She would just shut down, take some sleeping pills, not too many. I'm not saying that, but she would take. She just
to escape.
She wanted to escape. Like she never drank, she never used drugs, she didn't even curse. But the problem is she would never talk about it, and so now she does. Like when Pops passed away, now she talks about it, and she'll ask about it because I'm 39. You're right around the same age, right?
34, yeah.
Okay. Like we weren't supposed to talk about it. We're like, you're supposed to push everything down, right? And just be like, and stone face, like, hey, we're going to be evicted. Don't worry, I'll take care of it. And you have no idea, and the insides are just going like crazy. So, but the dad thing was the confidence thing, right? Because you would go to football practice, and then I remember this one football, they like had everybody's dad behind them, and like me and my brother, like, so that sticks with you, and you could use that as an excuse, but you start feeling like you're not good enough,
right? And
then the depression part was just, and then anxiety was the worst. Like you're not good enough, like, and then you be in these people's house and you see their life. I remember going to someone's lake house that was a friend of mine, and I was just like, their house is bigger than almost 4 apartments in my building, and there wasn't resentment, but I was just like
amazed.
Yeah, I just felt bad. I felt like I was inadequate. And Andy was on our show, Andy Udi, and I told her the story. Her mom's running for mayor in Seymour, and like I would always just talk to her into the driveway, but I would never like actually try to date her because like I'm not good enough for you. So that was my mentality. Like I'm not good enough for anybody. This, and it changed when I met Steph. But I mean, but there's a dark place that you go, and it just happens. But you never talk about it. So like there's been times where that's why I don't own a gun in my house. And I know it sounds weird to say, but I don't. And me and AP talk about it all the time. It's like, that's why I don't have a gun. I'm manic depressive. Like it could just happen, you know, and you start thinking about something and it's something in your body. You can take medicine for it. And this reason I don't, I know it sounds weird. I want to feel the highs with the low. So when my son gets in and plays a game, or my oldest son, for when he first started, he's learning to drive, I want to feel that happiness. But you don't on some of those medicines because it numbs you. You're like, hey, you know, I want $1 million. Great. And, you know, hey, you're about to be evicted. Hey, okay. But you don't have no emotions, and you have to feel those emotions. And Pops was the same way. Like, Pops was just the same no matter what, right? Because old school, push everything down. Everything will be all right. I'll figure it out. And that's when a lot of men won't talk about it. So this probably this 21-year-old kid, I don't know the full story, but there also could be something in their life that happened traumatic that they're embarrassed by, even though it happened to them. You know, it could be something terrible. You know, like there could be, you know, like even females too. I'm not just saying men, but, you know, they could be molested or they could be raped. There's something can happen and they still feel like it's their fault. Absolutely. Because a lot of time in society, it is their fault. And, you know, and I think that's what's wrong with the brain sometimes is like you blame yourself for it. And, you know, and there's a nice to lay in bed and look at my wife. I'm like I am not good enough for her. She does nothing to say it. My wife is probably the most laid back. I mean, like, this is my 8th podcast this week, right? But because she knows we're chasing dreams, but I still have that. I'm like, well, what if she would have? I think she deserves better. She deserves a better house. And then it just starts eating at me, and then you start going in that dark place, and the dark place is, it's just the way you're wired. But when I'm at AP, things change, right? So I would talk to him, and I would tell him like that, and he would listen. So AP doesn't have depression, right?
No, he is, and I mean this truly. This is not a joke. He is one of the most positive human beings I've ever been around. Now, ADHD we've talked about 100%, but when you talk about that idea of, pushing everything down and just saying, I'm gonna figure it out, AP is the exact opposite. And he can talk about it like, oh, this is all going on, but to him it's like, yeah, we'll figure it out. It's all right. And he's got such a positive outlook on problems that he truly believes it. And I remember one time you guys talking on your show, and he's like, if I lose my job tomorrow, I got to make this much a month. So all I got to do is find these odd jobs to get to this.
And then I argued with him because in my mind I was like, no, I'm going to lose everything because I'm a pessimist. I'm an optimistic person, but also a pessimist. Like, I will tell you can do anything in the world, but in the back of my mind, I'm like, I can't do this. So, and a lot of times with people that have anxiety and depression is, and I looked something up because and the funny part is you won't be able to, you don't even notice the signs like that you might have it. And is like 11 things others don't realize you're doing because of your high functioning anxiety. And I know a lot of people say, well, this is just an excuse for people, right? When I fly, I have anxiety because at one point in time I had altitude sickness on a plane. I couldn't breathe. So every time I got on a plane, is it going to happen again? So it causes that anxiety. So one of the things is decline invites, although you want to go. You're like, I want to go, but nah, I'm not going to go. Because, another one, obsesses over trivial things other people may not even notice. Like a simple word or unintentional glance from someone who's enough for your head to start processing, and if you work in a certain job, and they could be like, oh, what'd you put that for there? Like, they're like, okay. And then in the back of your mind, like, well, what are they talking about? What did I do? And then right away you start going back to that anxiety. And every situation, the worst scenario is your biggest thought. I laugh at that because if you're a pessimist, you're like, you rewind conversations in your head over and over again. I do that way too much.
Oh, yes.
You try to break it down and you try to be like, why did I do this? And why did I say that? I'm an idiot. God, they're going to think I'm stupid. I'm not going to get promoted. She's not going to call me back or whatever it is. So that was one of the ones that I really found when someone shows concern about you, you become even more worried about the same thing.
Even though they're just reaching out and care, you start to think, even to the point that I'm showing it too much. Yeah. I've got to hide it better. And, and I know you and I got the chance to talk, and, I struggle with anxiety. I've never had depression as bad. Now, before I kind of got myself regulated, my anxiety always manifested in anger. And, the one that you talked about, trivial little things. And I remember one of the first times I really, really noticed that it was to the point I had to do something. And I was sitting at the kitchen table, and my wife was eating breakfast, I believe, and I could hear her chewing. And I was so enraged listening to her chew, which is trivial. It's dumb. It's not a big deal. She wasn't even doing it loud. It wasn't like something, but I was so mad. It was crazy. And I remember finally kind of to myself thinking, why am I this mad about this? And I would vibrate inside. That's the best way I can describe it, is I could just felt like everything inside, it was like almost getting shocked. I was just vibrating. And I had to. And I will say, I understand where you're coming from on the highs and lows. When I was in college, I went to the doctor for my anxiety, and they prescribed me a medication. I couldn't stand it because I was exactly what you said. It didn't matter if I walked out and you told me I'd won the lottery or someone just stole my truck. I was going to be like, oh, okay, cool.
All right, cool.
And that's why I didn't do it. And then for probably 10 years, I stayed away from it. And I coped by saying, I have high stress jobs. And I kept telling myself that, I'm a coach. That's high stress. That's why I get angry. That's why I'm on edge. Then I was in administration. That's why. I always found a way to blame it on something else other than saying I need some help.
And then you're saying all these people are looking at me. What do you expect? I mean, I have blah 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 X amount of people, and then I get no breaks, and then like what?
Always find a way to explain it away.
Yeah, and it's one of those things is like, hey, why did anybody do dishes? And you're like, well, what? And I mean, it's a normal thing, and then you just start. You take that one inanimate object, and you're like, you're gonna take it out on this. And other people take it out on other people, like in a physical way, in a bad way, because that's how people cope is they deflect everything they're going through and throwing it on someone else.
And I looked up too an article that talked about 10 things that men struggling with mental health wish other men knew, and one of them was probably the toughest thing for me was I realized, okay, I've got a problem. I realized I need some kind of help. It's where do you go for that first step? And do you go to your family doctor? Do you go to a psychiatrist, a psychologist? Where do you go? And I did go to my family doctor, and he helped me out. And I can tell you that the last year and a half, 2 years, I've been on medicine, and it's helped me so much deal with situations. I'm a better husband. I'm a better father, better son, across the board. But it took me being willing to say, I have to walk in my doctor's office and admit I have something wrong. And I know I've heard you talk a lot about your relationship with your doctor. I can't stand going to the doctor. And I am one that didn't even have a doctor until probably 2 years ago when I had to do this, because I just always assumed, if I'm sick, I'll take something over the counter. I'll figure it out. So for me to walk in and actually have that conversation, and especially when it was something like that, because I did have that stigma of, I should be able to figure this out. I should be able to take care of this. I can fix it. It was tough to admit that I needed somebody else to help me. I needed to rely on someone else.
Yeah, and then I went to the doctor, but the other thing is I found I have other friends that have it, right? And it's almost like you build, like, let's just podcast. You have a podcast community. We do that, and there's comics have this and athletes have that. But if you have similar people have the similar things, and you can admit it, especially if you're a person that they look like you're always under control, right? And then you go in and tell them like, yeah, I am, but I deal with this, and then all of a sudden they're like, you deal with that, and then you're able to talk to them about it, and then that way they're like, hey, I'm having a bad day. Like, all right, hey, call me or whatever. Call me, text through, whatever we need to do. And then that's when I realized, like, hey, talk to somebody who might be going through it. I mean, alcoholics talk to alcoholics, right? Drug addicts talk to drug addicts, right? So, but we don't talk to other people about it because we're like, we'll get through it. And then that's when people can get through, start doing substance abuse, drinking, turning to drugs. And then the one thing about medicine is, they gave people Xanax for a lot of these things, right? And what happened? Guess what? Pharmaceutical people started using more they needed to do, right? And then they're like, hey, we're going to pull that back. Be like, you can't take as many, right? So that's one thing is that, but I think you have to find people that go through the same thing, right? But you have to admit that there is something wrong, and your best friend, who may be your brother for the longest time, and he might not be like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, and then you're also, you can be shamed as a man, be like, what are you, weak? What are you? And then they'll use other words, but you'll get the point, and you're like, yeah, I'm not going to talk about it then. But I think a lot of times with suicide is the times I thought about it was the thoughts of how I failed others, not the how I failed myself, but others, and thought about like, it'll be easier if I'm not around here.
And I think that's the toughest thing. Another thing that I've read in a lot of articles is it's almost impossible to understand mental health if you've never dealt with mental health. And I'm not saying like doctors or specialists, but even like for my wife has never had anxiety or depression or situations like that. So when I talked to her about how I felt, and I'm not putting her down, she was willing to listen, but to her, it doesn't make sense because she's never had those feelings. She's never been that anxious, that, upset about something. Or so I agree 100%. You've got to find those people who understand what you're talking about and why certain things trigger the way you feel.
And I think some people, and I'm going to play devil's advocate, some people use this as a crutch too. And that's one thing that it's just like when you go through and you look at like abuse or even rape, for example, is in first time you say it and you're like, all right, did it really happen? And the same thing, like, well, I'm dealing with depression, anxiety, and they're like, well, why? You know, I've never missed a day in work like 14 years, and I've never been late. I drive hours. Like yesterday, I had to be in Vincennes at like 9:30, and I was there at 9 a.m., and that's 2 hours and 10-minute drive, right? Mm-hmm. So I can still push through it, and I think that's what other people do is from the old school, right? It's like, just push through it. Or, you know, I mean, how many people after work that probably had their job at like a foundry, where were they at? They were at a bar.
And I love that you said that, because I wanted to bring up, going back to your first BJ Robbins project episode, when we talked about political correctness. Mm-hmm. There is a line, and I'm not trying to put anybody down, but I remember you guys talking about on there in some university in the UK that if you're not mentally ready to go take a test or go to class, you're excused. That's not life. As much as I believe in mental health and helping people, that's not life either. And I agree with you. I have good days, I have bad days, but you still have to go to work. I still have to be a father to my boys. I still have to, you know, you can't just say I'm not prepared to do anything.
And I think the workforce has changed, though. It's looked down upon more if you call in sick to work now, right? See, before a lot of people worked in industry, and I worked in retail, so retail's different, right? So if you work in like a foundry, if you want to take a sick day, you have those built in. It was no big deal. But now it's like, it's different. Like if you call in sick and it's looked different upon, but they still call like this new generation weak or whatever. But who's raising the generations?
Absolutely.
Right. I have two sons. They were growing up a certain way. I never hit my kids. You heard about what I was talking about. My real father, like it was brutal, right? But I never needed to do that to them. When they were little, yeah, we smacked their butt, that's different. I'm talking about take your belt off. And I never understood it. In school, I went to school in the 80s, late 80s or whatever, and then elementary school, Brown Elementary, like you can get a paddle. And I was like, why is this person that don't know me is going to hit me? Like, I don't like when my real dad hits me, because anger begets anger. And that's another thing is, so if you're angry and you take the anger out, and then that anger can be on that person can keep, that anger is never going to stop. So, because if you're like smack someone across the face, like behave, and you're like, okay. And then as soon as they get that chance to take that, and this is my opinion, I know a lot of people be like, well, back in the day, well, you know what? I was raised back in the day, and my kids are fine.
Well, I think it creates fear. Not learning, not respect. It creates fear.
Yeah, and then you can't manage people by fear. You know, if I get fired tomorrow, like probably 2 or 3 years ago, I'd be like, oh my God. But now I'm like, happens, it happens. We got to keep moving forward. But I think one thing to talk about is, but when that dark moment happens, and it happens, it just, something can trigger it. That's where you have to be like, I'm in a bad place. And that's where people have to be. With as much as stupidity as we post on social media in the nonsense and the hatred, but it could still be good. Like you have Messenger, you can message people on Snapchat, Instagram, whatever, Facebook Messenger, whatever, a regular text message. There's so many people you can reach out to.
Well, and you can connect. Like we talked at the beginning here, without podcasts, without the ability, if it was 1980, you and I would probably never know each other.
No.
Outside of maybe I would see at something going on at Pal's house or something, but never. But our ability to connect has been so much stronger. And you're right. There's positive and negative to it. And and I think a lot of the people who are so negative naturally on social media are dealing with some of the same struggles as the people that they're judging. They just can't yet come out and say it.
But because we can't be happy for others. When you start doing your same thing I'm doing, Flyover Media, you have your media studios going on, and I'm like, cool, that's cool.
Absolutely.
Like, I'm happy. But because a lot of people that are unhappy will deflect, will say that towards other people who are not happy with where they're at in life. You can't be happy for others. And I'm a person who does I've done open mics. I do the podcast. And I do all kinds of other things in the public, and I work in the public. But I am such an introvert. Like, I don't like, and that's another thing that's scary is because if you don't like to be around people and you isolate yourself so much, and then your mind just keeps going and going and going, like, and you see a picture of your buddies doing something, and you're like, oh, I don't want to go there. Like, you know, and that's, you just, I think a lot of it's self-inflicted, but it also goes back to something a lot of times is triggering it. You know, like I know with my mom's is Pop's passing, right? And then I know with the other things is there's something in their past that they can't outrun. And I have something, I won't say it here, but there's something that even to this day, like, probably 90, maybe 92, 90 or 92 or whatever. But there's some things that happen or whatever that most days I'm okay, but other days I'll think about it and there might be a story in the news and I'm like, oh my God. And I just I get angry about it because I went through and I'm like, is someone going to be there for that person? Is someone going to help them through that? They're just going to be, or they're not. Because I think a lot of it is we don't pay attention to our kids. I always do with so I have a friend that's a teacher in Seymour, Ryan Culberth, right? Mm-hmm. And he posted something on Facebook, which I can't stand to say when I say that phrase, but it was about the school shootings. And the day he posted that, I text my kids like, hey, what's up? How you doing? And just thought about that, like, you know, and we're so wrapped up in other things, but we don't pay attention. Back to when, you know, when it happened, when he killed himself, like I pulled my son in the room, and I don't think either one of I don't think Pops was said it or anybody else would have been talked about suicide. I said, hey, when it gets dark, that's what your fathers are for. When it gets dark, no matter what it is. Luke's came to me like when he broke up with his girlfriend. He came in, put his head on my chest, and started crying. Like, I don't think I would have ever done that. But I've created that culture, and Luke, like, Luke's a man's man, and you know, and so is Colin. They both have that ego in a good way, but they'll come in and say things are bad because I've created that culture. I'm like, and I'll decide the same way I tell my employees. I'm like, is that an 8 or higher? Right? Did you ever watch How I Met Your Mother?
Oh yeah. So
when they got married, it was 8 or higher. I live by that rule. If it's the 8 or higher, I'm stopping everything. No matter what, we're putting the phone down, TV's off. This is where we need to be at, right? Because a lot of things people tell you are not 8 or higher. You know, they're like, you know, like someone was 5 minutes late, or he's wearing my shoes or whatever, and I'm just like, that's not an 8 or higher. And I'm trying to get them to focus on like 8 or higher, right? And
absolutely.
And if we do that, I think we're able to focus on the real issues. But I think as parents, we're failing kids.
Well, one of the things you said on Smugcast when you were still doing it, and I'm telling you, this is a quote that I'll never forget. And you said, parents, put down your phone and stop worrying about posting a tweet or a post to save the world and save your kids.
Yeah, it was like my favorite parents are this. Like, no, I understand that you're hungry, but this post I'm going to get a bunch of likes, a bunch of shares. It's going to change the world. Just stay there. I understand you need your inhaler. It's fine. Just stay there. And I didn't get Facebook till a few years ago when we had to start promoting podcasts, right? Because I want to stay away from the negativity. And, you know, and I love seeing pictures of people's kids growing up, their families, vacations. Like, wow, that's so cool. Like, wow, their kid's so big. And they see pictures of my boys. And they're like, wow, I didn't realize he was that old and that's his wife. And, you know, we should celebrate it, but like you said earlier, behind that picture, what's really behind it?
Absolutely.
And I'm not saying everybody's life is miserable, but we live in a culture where it's 100 miles an hour. We don't slow down. I mean, I remember Mom being a single parent for a long time, and like we didn't fix dinner a lot. It was like, hey, you got football practice, you got this. We're gonna go get McDonald's, and it wasn't because she worked 2 jobs, right? And so I think now we created a culture where we're going a million miles an hour. And then when my mom moved in after Pops passed away, she was like, what are you doing? I was like, we're going to just make a frozen pizza. And she's like, now we're going to, and she started making dinner, and she moved back home. She's pretty close to actually right down the road from me, actually. And I was like, man, I miss those dinners.
Mm-hmm.
because we would sit there and eat them, and then we would talk, but we just don't talk to our kids. And then, so, you know, and I'm not saying anything towards that kid's parent. I don't know.
No,
obviously. But what I'm saying is like, learn from those, but we don't. We forget about it. You know, there's a school shooting, then we forget about it. Or let's say, for example, another terrorist attack, or someone kills them. Something we're just,
we get wrapped back up in
we
our
worry
own
about it
stuff.
in a minute. Yeah. We're like, hey man, the downloads are down. What are we doing? And none of that stuff matters. Because without death, life gives no meaning, right?
And you know, another thing that one of my former players said, and it goes right along with what you're saying, is we have to stop all getting together only at the funeral home. And you know, it really struck me to the core because, you know, when you get to that adulthood, and I not only just with my former players and students, but thinking to my friends and things like that, why is it the only time we gather is when we've lost someone or we're struggling or we're hurting? Why can't we get together and support each other in all the times, in the good times? But you're exactly right. We get so busy, and this is a silly thing, but when I was teaching sociology, I always taught this part because it goes back to our phones and social media and how connected we are. But when the first indoor washing machine was produced, it was marketed as it's going to save housewives unbelievable amounts of time. They'll do so much less laundry time because they're not out in a wash basin and wringing clothes out, and it's going to be so great. When you actually look at what that invention caused, is they actually doubled the amount of time they did laundry because the expectation of cleanliness went up so much because it was easier to do it. You had to wash laundry even more than what you did before. It's the same thing with the cell phones. And I tell kids at school all the time, they think I'm crazy, and it's amazing to me, but knowing, you know, with your age, you're right there too. Like when we were kids, you called somebody. If they didn't answer, you left a message on their answering machine. You may not get called back for 3 or 4 days because they may be gone for the weekend. They may be out of town. And that was totally acceptable. But if I call you and leave you a voicemail or text you and I don't hear from you in 24 hours, and sometimes shorter than that with certain people, it's like, oh my gosh, what's wrong? What's going on?
Because now I think it's on the other ones, but I know on the iPhone, like it transcribes the voicemail, so it'll tell you. It's basically still a text message.
Yeah,
you don't even have to listen to it.
Absolutely.
So and it was funny is because one of my friends, today's his birthday, Ben Politsky from Espresso, and I've always talked to him on Instagram through messages, but I was like, it was his birthday, so I physically texted him. I was like, I'll never hear from him, and he texted me back, and I was just like, really? It's like you never text me back about or return the phone call. But and so it's a different generation. And one of the things is people always talking about their phones. And what's weird is I came home Friday night around 12:30, and my kids were, my oldest was outside with his friends. You know what they were doing? Throwing the football.
Oh, that's awesome.
But they're on their phones because they remind me a lot of us. They have their buddies over and they're playing Madden 2020, and they're sitting there playing. And then they're like, let's go outside. They throw the football. They throw the Frisbee. My kids are boring, and I'm okay with that, right? My youngest plays football, but they're always on their phone. But I thought about how many kids spent so much time on TV and spent so much time on their on TV or playing video games and stuff. I played a ton of video games.
Oh, absolutely.
And now I have a phone, and I feel like, but other people, I think social media can make a lot of people feel lonely. And that's one thing that someone was talking about, like, because back in the 50s, we talked about this before, like, where did this nuclear family come from? Who created it? Who said we have to be this way? It was created for us. Like the old sitcoms, how was it created? Like if you watch TV starts to dictate like almost how you're supposed to live your life a little bit. Like you had, what was it, Leave the Beaver? Mm-hmm. You had Mary Tyler Moore Show. You had these shows where you'd see the wife with the cookies. You see the husband come home with the briefcase. But they never really had, except for Jackie Gleason, obviously that show, Honeymooners. That was different, but that was like, oh, that's New York. That's how they do it in New York. But in the Midwest, this is how you're supposed to be. But you never saw the guy come home from like out of, it was always based around a successful businessman with a wife at home and the 2 kids, the dog and a cat and a white picket fence, right? So a lot of times back to failure, you feel like, well, and that was me. I was like, I have to get to this. Like, I don't want to grow up the way I did. And you feel like you don't get to a certain place and you're like, wow, I failed. And I failed everybody around me, had especially if you've had high expectations set on you, because it was always like, well, he's going to make it. And I was just like, so me and my brother, I think, we both are married, we both have kids, we both have jobs, and coming from where we came from was pretty good. But there's still those demons of like, why did dad bounce? And then when the real father goes to prison and it's on the front page of the paper, and you start thinking like, and that's what ate at me. He went to jail for molestation, and that's my father, and things are hereditary. And living in a small town, that created a lot of anxiety. So when I had 2 sons, I was actually happier. Just because you were worried about what people were going to think. Mm-hmm. And that's why I don't hold other people's kids. There's a lot of things that like mentally mess me up with that. Like, I'm not doing that. And that wasn't even the worst thing, but that was one of the worst things. I was like, one of my buddies has 2 daughters. I never really held them ever at all. If I did, it was like one of these, like, yay, here's, and that's, and no one thought that, but that's where
your mind is.
Goes back to depression. You're you're overthinking it, and you're thinking back in your head, and you're like, his dad went to jail for this. I wonder if he's like that at all. And it starts creeping in your head, and you start thinking that you're a bad person. You've done nothing. Or if your dad's an alcoholic, or your mom's, abuses prescription, whatever the cliche is. And you start thinking that because you're waiting for the other shoe to fail. Like, all right, when is my problems going to start happening? And then instead of enjoying it, but people don't understand, like, just go for a walk, it'll be fine. Well, that might work for you, but not everybody, it'll work for everybody. Me was like, what helped me was finding my passion, which was this. And being able to meet great people and be able to do that. And that's why someone has to find something that's very therapeutic. But you have to realize that you do have a problem. Same with addiction. You have to know you have a problem. And it's okay to have a problem. I'm not saying you're weak. I mean, like I said, I have the epitome of where you want to be at. But I still have times where I'm like, I don't know if I want to be here anymore. And that's so weird to say. Because everybody's always been around me. They'd be like, so if you listen to the show I did last Friday, or coming out tomorrow on Juice, you'd be like, man, that guy's funny. He has a lot of fun. He's something. But those are the ones that are the scariest ones.
Well, and even to the point of, your previous show was Smugcast. I mean,
yeah.
And you're a confident dude. I'm not putting that down. But the character that you played in that show, turning you up to 10, you would never think anything could ever bother you.
And that's why I contacted you, because if you're sitting in a room of kids and you just go through your story, I have everything where you want to be at. My son has the brand new iPhone. I'm not talking about materialistic things, but we're able to provide, right? And we have a good life, but it's just weird how our minds work, because our minds are just, and it just goes back to wonder is like, where did this come from? And it is your environment, and some of it is hereditary. It's almost like diabetes a little bit. Like some of it's even if you take care of yourself, you can still get it, heart disease, whatever. It's your mind can just make you feel however you want to feel. And when I heard that story with a kid, and I was just like, and it resonated with, like, I guarantee he was probably a very happy-go-lucky kid, right?
Oh my gosh, yes.
And probably like, man, that. Look at him, there he is, and you're laughing, and then all of a sudden you're like, I don't believe this. Why? And no one will ever know why, unless there's a journal or something like that. That's why AP and Moy have access to my phone, not in a bad way, because that way there's stuff in there that way, and most people know about it, but there's still things in there to be like what you're going through, and like writing helps a lot. You have to find your passion. But being in a small town where everybody knows everybody, that's the hard part about saying anything. Hey, did you know Jimmy's depressed? And you're like, is he? Did you talk to him? Is he doing okay? Let's go see what he's doing. Let's take him to a movie. Let's do something for him or her. Because everybody's like, most women are depressed anyways. Or you always have these cliches, but I have a friend that deals with depression. A lot of times his husband doesn't know she's depressed. Because he's such a happy-go-lucky person. Like, she just must not feel good. And that's your husband. Think about that. That's your husband, but she might not want to say nothing because she don't want to sound like she's complaining. Like, she was complaining again last night about, how unhappy she is. I don't know what her problem is. And we just move on because we're more focused. And I don't want to say this society now is more focused on me, on yourself. It's been like that forever.
Well, I think that is a natural part of our genetic makeup, because I mean, you go back as we've evolved as a species, you always had to. I know it sounds bad, but you always had to look out for number one. I mean, going all the way back to thousands of years ago. I mean, if it was you and I, and there's a tiger, I mean, I'm looking out for me. I mean, that naturally, I'm going to think about myself first.
Yeah, and that's a great point. But I think what helped me was dealing with this. I met a lot of people. Moy always says this to me, and like I said, he's like, you take on everybody else's problems because that's how you deal with your problem. Like, you're not able to think about what you're going through because you're like, feed me what you have, and I will help you. And then the worst part is that at times, like, you want to say something to somebody about what's going through. You're like, yeah, I don't want to bother nobody. No one cares, even though you have people that care.
And that's another great point that you just said, because I was the same exact way in some of my worst moments. Give me what you're going through, because I can dissect and give you great advice and help you solve your problem and have no worries, even though I may be dealing with the same thing and have no idea what to do.
Yeah, and that's the good part about it, because it could be a little thing is like coming here, I'm like, all right, what I want to wear, right? So I was like, well, I might wear this. I'm like, man, that's too tight. I don't like the way it makes me look. And then you just like, whatever. And it's like that little thing can stick with you. Like, man, I can't believe that shirt don't fit no more. Mm-hmm. Like when I went to the doctor, he's like, hey, you lost weight. And I'm like, really? Like, because you're right away assuming that I gained weight and then that, but we have to, I know it's just sad when people won't talk to each other, and I think a lot of it is because we're afraid of what they're gonna say. Like, what are you, weak? Mm-hmm. What are you, baby? Come on, you're just walk it off, rub dirt on it, whatever you want to say.
You've got everything. You want to hear my problems? Yeah. I got
real world problems, but it could be. But what I said was it could still go back to something that happened many years ago.
Absolutely.
And because there is post-traumatic stress disorder, there is something so traumatic that can stick with you that like it won't go away and it can eat at you. And all it takes is one thing to set them off. It's, just not soldiers that get it. It's other people that get it, victims of abuse, all kinds of things like that. But I feel like we just have to, it'd be nice to have a support group of people that have, like, you're going through the same thing I'm going through. Like, you deal with depression, anxiety, bipolar. Like, sit around and talk about it. And the old joke would be like, man, I'm not as bad as that person. And it might make you feel better, but you're talking back and forth like I could have a lot worse.
Well, and it's all in our perspective. Mm-hmm. I mean, I may look at you and say, I don't have it as bad as him. And you may look at me and say, I don't have it as bad as him. So you're exactly right. It can help, support some of those things. And I want to go back real quick. When was, obviously talking about your childhood and the struggles that you had there, when was the first time when you really felt, obviously the confidence issues came out, not feeling good enough, that you truly felt you were hitting depression? That it wasn't just, I'm trying to, cope with or understand the things that are happening to me, that I'm truly hitting depression?
I think it was in probably high school, maybe middle school. We were living off O'Brien Street. And I remember laying in mom's bed because, like, I slept on a futon and me and my brother shared a room or whatever. And I was laying in her bed. I think she was working third shift. And I was just like, why does my real dad don't want me? Like, that's just started it. Like, made me depressed, start crying. Like, why does he not want me? Like, why? What did I do? Like, I didn't ask to be born. And now as a father, I'm like, try to keep me away from my kids. Like, I would never choose anything over them, right? And that just, as I became a father, just bothered me more. And it just ate at me like, why does he not? And I think that's, and Juice, one of our friends, always wants to be famous, right? Like, I wanted to make it to show I didn't need you, and that's not good energy to have. I don't hate my real father. I don't hate anybody, right? So, and I always say, if I don't hate him, then there's no reason I can hate anybody else. But that's when it started. It was just like, why does he not want me? And I always felt like an outsider at times. I'm like, oh, and we grew up poor, right? I remember spending food stamps at convenience on O'Brien Street convenience store, and like, I'm not good enough, and it just. Like, we want BJ to go. He probably doesn't have the money. Or, they didn't say that, but that's
what you thought.
Yeah, I just thought I was poor white trash in a trailer park, government, like, cheap apartments.
So when you met Stephanie, how did you fight through that? Because I know you and I have talked. She's got a very different background than what you had as well.
Her mom had passed away. Her mom. We met in. We had our first date August 10th, 1998. Her mom had died April 30th, 1998. So I was able to see what she was going through, and I'm like, I need to make sure she's happy. So like all my energy went to that.
So instead of thinking about I'm not good enough for her, it goes back to exactly what we just talked about. You saw someone with a problem, with a struggle, and you put your energy into helping them be better.
Yeah, and it ate at me for so long, and then I was like, why am I alive, right? And like her mom worked at Muscatatuck, worked with special needs kids. That's what she did. She was a teacher and did all these things, physical therapist. And like that still ate at me like this day. Like, why is she not here? And then like, why am I here? Like, I always felt like she has more to offer. Like that's so ridiculous to say out loud, but that's the way your brain can work. Because her dad is a research chemist for DuPont, Dr. Anthony S. Ragone, right? So he's a huge success, right? Worked at DuPont. And then her was her mom, right? And I'm like, they married this dude from Seymour that had no job at that time, living with his parents, not going to go to college. And then right then and there, so the longest time I did feel like that. But she was going through that, and then I was able to realize that like she didn't realize how bad the depression was. We talked about it a few months ago, like how bad it gets. Like she's like, why do you sit in the car and eat your food? And I finally was like, I don't want to burden her with this because I don't want to scare her after 20 years of being together. But and it's weird, but that's the first time when I was just like, why am I not good enough? Why am I in this crappy apartment? Why did I deserve this? Why did my dad leave? Like, why did all these things happen? Even though Pops was like my baseball coach and basketball coach, my parents, they hadn't started dating yet. Like I think he was 14, 15 years old when he really, became living with us, or they get together, whatever the phrase is. But that's how I always felt. But I always felt like Mom would be depressed, and then, Craig was oblivious. I don't mean that. If you listen to this, that's not what I mean. Because Craig's Craig. But I felt like I had to try to keep things together. Like when Pops died, I felt like I had to keep things together. Then even when my grandma died, I was like, I got to keep everybody together. And then at times, then you just get so worn out, and you're like, I don't want to do anything no more. I just want to lay in bed and put headphones on, listen to music or whatever, and just disappear. And then like I would become distant from everybody.
When your mom was depressed growing up, did you feel like you had to be that entertainer to make her smile, to make her laugh, to try and help pull her out of that?
Yeah, we'd always watch, I know it's a running joke, but we'd always watch Jumpin' Jack Flash, which is a Whoopi Goldberg movie, and then A Burglar, which is another one. And my aunt she had HBO, and we talked about this a lot, but she would tape HBO, and then we didn't have cable at the time or whatever. But we would watch movies, and that's why I don't like, if I watch serious movies at times, like emotional movies, like it just, like I don't want to do it. Like it'll just eat at me or whatever. But that's why I got into comedy, was because, and this is the funny part, we were talking about jokes off the air, and that came from dark places. But that's when I met AP, and he's like, dude, go to that dark place and pull something out of it. He's like, you have in the past, just pull something out of it and be amazed at it. And in that dark place, like, a lot of my favorite comedians and other things were crazy, people, and that dealt with depression, and, Mitch Hedberg, who dealt with heroin, and a lot of the comedians are some funny people, are the most self-conscious people in the world. I think bullies are the most self-conscious people at times too. Like, I'm going to make fun of this kid because that way they'll never say anything about me.
Yeah, it deflects all the attention off of me.
Yeah, there's a song by an artist named Token. It does with bullying, and if you watch the video, it's like, and I showed it to my kids, and I was like, don't be that kid that, because at the end they end up, he shoots the two bullies, and he actually shoots Token because he was like, you're the worst of all. Like, you didn't say anything or do anything. And, it's a good video for kids to watch, and it's like, don't be the kid that, because a lot of times, like, they're picking on Johnny again, and, like, you don't know, that could drive Johnny to do that or drive Johnny to, like, end everything. And, I mean, bullying is part of growing up. I get it. But I used to bully a lot, I guess. And then when I got, like, probably 17, 18 or whatever, I went the opposite way. I was like, I'm going to make fun of bullies. Like, just no reason. And as I get older, and it's one of those things, is I don't like people to talk to people a certain way.
And it's amazing to me now that I'm older, because some people that have like off the wall interests, or like I said with this podcast, and even some of the other ones we've done, things that I normally probably wouldn't ever be interested in. I love talking to them about it because I love seeing their passion and the amount of time they put into it and things like that. It blows my mind. And I'm so glad that I've been able to open up my mind a little bit more and say, this may not be for everybody, but it's really cool that this is totally what they're into and what their passion is, and get to hear from them is pretty cool.
Yeah, and there are people that might listen to that know me growing up, like, dude, that dude's an a-hole.
Oh, yeah,
like,
absolutely.
Dude, he just make fun of people constantly. That's just him. And they'll listen to it and realize that some of that came from, like I want to deflect this back on you. Or
well, you want to attack before being attacked.
And with the name like BJ growing up, and I could have went by Brian, but I always stuck to that because I know that name was not given from my father. It was given from the nurses when I didn't have a name for like 2 weeks. It's such a, and that's another thing I think bothers me is like, they're like, oh, your name's really BJ. And I'm like, yes. So when I was born, my name is Brian Joe, not Joseph. We didn't go to the Bible with just straight, because my biological father's name is Joe, Joe, right? And so my grandma was born in Hazard County, Kentucky. There's no, like, she was born at home. To the day she died, they didn't know what year she was really born.
Wow.
Because it's one of those, it's a farm, we have kids, we move on, right? So my brothers sat low and they said, well, you're going to have a boy. And obviously it was a boy. I said hi. They said, hey, it's going to be a girl. It's going to be a girl. So grandma did the old school. Well, she was 50%. I was another boy. And when I was born, I think when they had like Brittany point, I think I was 30 years old. My mom finally told me, it was like, yeah, it was Brittany. We didn't have no boy name picked out. So the nurses and people just kept saying, hey, what about this name? What about this name? And so even from birth, everything was interesting. So they you used to say Robbins baby, then it said BJ Robbins. So from birth, I've been called BJ. And then I think a lot of that, I think I wore that as a badge of honor. Like, all right, I'm going to have this name. It's going to be a difficult name. Didn't realize it was difficult till I got like probably 9 or 10. Why it was difficult? Because I thought it was cool. It's 2 initials. That's awesome, right?
Easy to spell. I don't have to work.
But it's the name that's messed up the most. Can I speak to DJ? Is CJ there? I'm just like, it's 2 letters. But even that was just like a unique way of me. That's why I was always stuck with that name, because I was like, I feel like I'm poor. I feel like I'm this. But if you're gonna come at me, I'm gonna have it loaded no matter what. And then that's why I would study people, study their mannerisms, and study this. And I was always on the defense and never on the offense, right? So, because I was always like, someone's going to have something to say to me. Like, I remember just, growing up poor, and you just, like, when Guess jeans come out, I remember got Wranglers, or ripped the Wrangler patch off so no one know what they are. Because a lot of those things, it's so trivial now. I look at it, I was like, that's so stupid, because I got $22 Levi's on from Walmart. I don't care.
But it was huge then.
Yeah, and it's like, because it just ate at you, and it goes back to like, I'm not good enough. I hate that we don't have money. I hate that I don't have anything. I hate. And eventually that hate turns into anger, and the anger turns into like, I don't want to do this no more. I'm tired of being here, and you could just be done.
And and that's something I always say to some of my teachers too, just to remind people that when kids come to us and say, "I'm so overwhelmed, I'm so stressed out, my anxiety's huge," it's so easy as an adult to say, "Kid, you don't have any idea what anxiety is yet. You don't have any idea what stress is. Wait till you have kids. Wait till you have a job. Wait till you have to pay bills." Mm-hmm. But everything is relative to the person, because what you just said right there is so true. Because when we were in high school, everybody had that feeling of, do I have the right clothes? Do I look the right way? Am I doing the right thing? And that caused stress. It caused anxiety in people. But in the flip side now, at our age now, we look back and we're like I would never, if you walked in, thought, oh my gosh, he's got Wrangler jeans on from Walmart. Like, I don't even pay attention to that stuff. Honestly, I probably wouldn't even know if you had jeans on right now with you sitting down, because I didn't even pay attention to it.
Yeah,
I know you got a Concept hoodie on, because I saw Concept and I was like, I've been listening to Concept all weekend. So.
But and everybody's like, well, everybody. If I don't have a lot of regrets, right? I don't want to live like that, but I wish I would have known that, like with podcasting now, and I'm not saying anything to do with podcasting, but I wish, if anything, would have went into like counseling or went into like, hey, I get you, like, hey, instead of because a lot of times is because we want kids now to be like. My son's 16, like, hey, and I already have people asking, what school is he going to go to? Has he thought about what college? And I'm like, dude, he's 16. Like, let him be. Like, we want kids to sit down and be uniform and be little adults. They're not little adults.
Oh, they're kids.
If they think they're little adults, like, I got my license at 16. I was driving at 16. Now there's a waiting period, right? There's a reason there's a waiting period now. I agree with that one, And
no, because I know how I was at 16 driving.
Yeah, luckily they didn't have very nice cars, so I couldn't really do anything. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but I was just like, I'm so glad because, and that's how I made it. I said I was 20 minutes away. I made it down here in like 10 minutes. So sorry to that semi, but I think you have to find something as an outlet that's healthy, right? I mean, dude, I would stress eat. That's why I gained so much weight. Like I would stress eat, eating my driveway, and I'd be like, what am I doing? And I have a great family, like a mom to my brother, but it doesn't matter because your brain says none of that matters. All thing that matters is you suck. Everybody thinks you suck. You're overweight. You took a big pay cut. Your show ended. Now you're trying to do this other thing. It's not going as well as this. Like, why do you keep even trying anything? And your brain just keeps eating at you. And then no matter how much you grind and no matter how much you try, sometimes you can't outrun it. Mm-hmm. And you got to sit down and be like, hey, I'm going to text. And that's why I talk to Agent Sensation Moy a lot because he deals with the stress, anxiety. He just had his third son. His name is Luciano too, by the way.
Really?
With 2 C's. So, and that was such an honor. Like, hey, I like your son's name. I'm going to honor him. So we'll always have that bond, right? But you have to have somebody who you can trust to talk to, and I think, and I don't know his situation, and it's just heartbreaking, and it's just like because there's something probably could have talked to somebody, but probably didn't want to say what was happening. Mm-hmm. You look at someone like Mac Miller who just hit everything with drugs and the pain, and because drugs help. I ain't gonna lie. I mean, I use my fair share of taking extra Xanax and be like.
Yeah, self-medicating.
Or take a Vicodin and drink some NyQuil and just be asleep for 12 hours. Or people that drink or whatever. But I just think mental health is something that's important, but there's still the other sides. I think that the problem with mental health, why people don't take it seriously is because it's like everything else, people abuse it. You had the Cavs player come out and talk about anxiety. Love, I think his name is
Kevin Love.
Kevin Love came out and was like, hey, I have anxiety. Think about it. It is look at how we rip these athletes or these actresses or these politicians.
Michael Phelps is another one I was just reading about this morning. I mean, he talked about in 2014 he was really considering committing suicide. This guy is a guy who is similar to what you're saying. Look at the gold medals he's won. I mean, he was one of the most dominant swimmers in history and was in a dark place to where he didn't know if he wanted to still live anymore. American
icon, right? Mm-hmm. And that's one thing we do to our heroes is we what's the phrase? Either die a hero or live long enough to become a villain. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why a lot of these athletes feel, and I think that's why a lot of actors, the kids feel like, oh, everybody loves me, and then like feels like no one likes me. And the human mind is amazing. But I think we have to respect what people go through and just listen. Because a lot of times we don't listen, right? All we want to do is point out, like, I don't know why they're so unhappy. He's got this. I don't even have that. Like, whatever. And that's what we do is because we're like, I don't care. And we shut down. And someone hears that I don't care. And especially for someone you care about, it's like, I don't care.
Well, brother, we're at an hour and 5 minutes, and I want to say this before we jump off here. And number one, thank you for coming, being willing to tell your story and talk. And I know when we talked, I think, and this isn't patting each other on the back, I think what we just did is really powerful, because the two of us sat here and talked about mental health, talked about our own struggles, talked about friends that we know that struggle. And like I said, if you listen to any of our other shows, no one would probably expect this episode coming out the way it did.
No, they would say smug, arrogant, belittling, borderline anti-PC. But that's what I'm saying is I always call myself crazy, is because I think everybody has different sides to them. But the hardest thing to do is do this. That's what I want to do, is like you strip yourself down to the purest form and be like, hey, I struggle.
Mm-hmm.
But I have people around me I can count on. For the longest time, is I didn't want to say anything because it's embarrassing. So reach out to people. I mean, hell, I don't even care if I don't know you. So, I mean, you just reach out.
Yeah, and you know, if you're struggling right now, if you need somebody to talk to, you know, find us on social media, reach out to us, find someone that you trust to talk to, and it's vital, you know, because you would be amazed. I know we talked about earlier how many of us are dealing with those same struggles on an everyday basis, and the biggest problem is maybe we don't do a good job of sharing them, and that's why I know you wanted to come down. That's why I was excited to have you on. And like you said, originally we were going to come down and talk about podcasting and, you know, the stuff we were doing with producing and all of that stuff, and I think this is a much, much more powerful episode than we could have ever done.
Yeah, and in closing is, like, you guys are good enough. You can come back from anything. That's what's great about life. You can. But you are good enough. There's always tomorrow. There is always tomorrow. Like, even though tomorrow's not guaranteed, but the only way it's not guaranteed is not believing in that there's not a tomorrow. But you are good enough. I mean, look at my story where I'm at now, and I still struggle, but you can get somewhere. It doesn't have to be the way that it doesn't have to end the way you think it has to.
And you can manage it. It's not, you know, neither one of us are sitting here saying that there's a cure.
No,
both of
not.
us still struggle. Both of us still have bad days. Both of us. So it's not that, but you can manage it, and you can still succeed and live a very fulfilling life without making that decision that ends it early.
Yeah, and there's still people out there that love and care about you. And even if you think that you don't, there are people that still love and care about you that will be there for you. And sometimes, I know this is the most difficult thing, you're going to have to remove yourself from a certain situation. Because if you keep telling Johnny he's a piece of crap, eventually Johnny's going to believe he's a piece of crap.
Absolutely.
But thanks for having me down.
Hey, brother. Appreciate it. Love all the stuff you're doing. Like I said, this will be a special episode for me because, again, it's totally off the wall of what we typically do, and I appreciate it.
No, anytime.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining us. This is episode 2 of Speaking from Experience, and join us again next week. We'll be talking to local comedian Jeff Toy. He'll be on the podcast meeting with us. We will also have a special episode here coming out with the mural artist who just painted the John Mellencamp mural in Seymour. So make sure that you join us for all of those episodes. And again, if you're having any struggles, you need help with anything, please reach out, find someone you can trust and talk to, and we're here for you. And we care about you, and we want to see you, you know, for the rest of our lives. So thank you, everybody.